18th, 2020 regular meeting of council to order. I will give the invocation this evening. Father, we thank thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment for business at hand. Guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Here.
Mr. Marn?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Donovan?
Here.
Mrs. Dowling?
Here.
Mr. Kirchner?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Good evening. I want to welcome the public to this City Council virtual public meeting. If you are attending through the published WebEx link, you will notice a window open on the bottom right-hand side of the screen entitled Q&A. This window will have been open 5 minutes prior to the start of the meeting and will remain open for 10 minutes after the meeting begins, for a total of 15 minutes. During that time, if you wish to address council at a later point in this meeting, please type your name, address, and the topic you wish to speak about. This is the only means for you to schedule your participation, since the public cannot physically attend in person at this time. At the appropriate time during the meeting, I will recognize you and you will be unmuted. You will be permitted to make comments to council on the topic you requested to speak about. If the topic is tonight's public hearing, please also type whether you are speaking for or against the topic in order to be recognized in the proper order. If you wish to comment on an item on the agenda, you will be recognized when that item appears on the agenda. All other comments unrelated to the agenda will be heard near the end of the meeting during the persons before council portion of the agenda. Please make your speaking request at this time, and thank you for your virtual participation. Approval of minutes. Council, you received the minutes of the regular meeting of May 5th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second. Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marn?
Yes.
Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
The minutes of the May 5th, 2020 regular meeting have been approved. Public hearings. We have one public hearing this evening. This public hearing is being held pursuant to notice duly published and posted according to law. Ordinance number 20-0-044.
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended, Part 11, Title 3, Sections 1131.06, 1135.03, and 1137.06 to modify publication requirements for the Board of Building and Zoning Appeals, conditional use permits, rezonings, and amendments to the zoning code and sections, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zeman, would you please provide an overview of the proposed code amendments within this legislation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Members of council, the purpose of this is really to sort of modernize a bit some of the publication requirements. As the council is aware, members of the public have an opportunity for certain applications, whether it's before the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, or this council, to speak and be heard on some of those matters. And part of that right to speak is to get some good advance notice of the hearing. Currently, 2 publication requirements are required in a newspaper of general circulation. And one can imagine that made a lot of sense back when newspapers were the go-to medium for persons looking to be up to speed on matters that were happening in their community. But with the current emphasis and reliance on electronic media, we think that those 2 newspaper publications are probably a bit archaic, but more to the point, not as effective as they may have been in the past. And so some of these modifications would require, for example, that these notices be posted on the city's website, for example. That being, again, bit of a more of a modern and something that we suspect is a matter that people would rely on more than they may simply on. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I see no one has requested to speak in favor of this item. I see no one has requested to speak against this item. Council is in receipt of all correspondence and emails pertaining to this matter. This public hearing is adjourned. Tabled legislation, we have none. New legislation, ordinance number 20-0-044.
An ordinance amending the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor 2006 as amended, Part 11, Title 3, Sections 1131.06, 1135.03, and 1137.06 to modify publication requirements for the Board of Building and Zoning Appeals, conditional use permits, rezonings, and amendments to the zoning codes and sections, and declaring an emergency.
Council, what is your pleasure?
Ben?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-044 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-045.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a mentor incentive grant with Alloy Bellows Corporation.
Mr. Flippia.
Mr. President, members of council, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Malachek here momentarily to talk about virtues of this mentor incentive grant. We're happy that Alloy Bellows is able to move forward with a project that they've been contemplating for a number of years. The only thing I wish to point out to council is that this will actually be the third incentive grant with Alloy Bellows, also doing business with Star Precision. We adopted one in December of 2015, which is in effect and which they have been enjoying the benefits of that up to this point. There was a second agreement adopted in 2017 in June, which contemplated a similar type of improvement project that did not go forward at a location separate from where they're currently doing business. So if you adopt this ordinance tonight, we would be rescinding both of those MIGs on file and replacing it with this one. So Mr. Malachek, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak. As it says, as we presented in the staff memo, Alloy Bellows did acquire Star Precision a few years ago, which is located at 615 and Lindsay Drive. They're going to be moving their entire operation over from Highland Heights to the Star Precision building, also building a 20,000 square foot addition onto the building, worth approximately $4 million when the construction is completed. We do anticipate there's going to be $1.7 million in new payroll that's going to be brought over by Alloy Bellows, will result in 54 new jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. In this era, hearing of new jobs, 54, that couldn't be better news. Thank you. Council, what is your pleasure?
Ben?
Please call the roll.
Mr. Lantig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes. Yes. Move to approve.
Second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-045 has been approved. Ordinance number 20-0-046.
Ordinance levying an additional $5 annual license tax on motor vehicles registered in the city of Mentor.
Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. You, as council would read, would have seen in its staff report, the Ohio Ohio Legislature with House Bill 62, which was adopted in 2019, allowed, as part of their transportation budget, allowed for a new permissive tax to be levied by both townships and municipalities in Ohio for the purpose of road improvements, road construction, paying the debt on roads, but all things associated with taking care of our roadways within our communities. Currently, just to give a little bit of history, there has not been an opportunity for cities to see any additional benefit from vehicles registered within our community since 1987. Right now, Mentor residents pay $61 to register a passenger vehicle community. Of that amount, $31 goes to the state, $17.50 goes to the county, and $7.50 goes to the city. What this would allow for is an additional $5 placed on that registration fee. All but 100% of that would go directly into road improvements in our community. So I know none of us likes to talk about increases in fees, but I will tell you that this is one of those fees that probably has a pretty good bang for the buck associated with it. We have about 50,000 vehicles registered annually in our city, so this generates about this would generate about $200,000. Council is aware of the fact that 100% of that goes into the roadways. We don't spend any of that on wages, on benefits. We spend none of that on any other purpose other than asphalt and concrete that goes into our neighborhoods and on our major roadways. It's a relatively small amount compared to our overall transportation budget in the city. In a year like this year, where we have a very robust road program in place, we'll be putting about $8 million into the roadways. Now, a lot of that, probably half of that, if not a little more, is grant monies that we receive. But it's important to note that without the ability to match that with local funding, we wouldn't be eligible for a lot of those grant revenues. So it isn't a huge amount of money, and I think we all feel a little bit uneasy when we're raising fees for any reason in our community. But as I said, the last time cities had an opportunity to benefit from vehicle registration fees was in 1987. It's one of those things, like so many other things, when we improve our roadways every year and just simply maintaining them, there's costs associated with that that have an inflationary factor every single year. But these fees don't change. So, every 20, 30 years, if there's an opportunity to increase some small amount the benefit that we receive from vehicle registrations, it predominantly offsets nothing much more than the inflation that's accumulated over the years. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And I would tell you as well that I think I'm joined by the city engineer in recommending this to you.
Mr. President?
Yes, Ms. Dowling.
Yes. Mr. Filipiak, could you explain how if we pass this evening, how this will work for the residents?
Yes, thank you. So the legislation is somewhat interesting. In order for this to be able to be elected in the year 2021, so for vehicle registrations for the year 2021, which most people will register for this year, this has to be adopted as a non-emergency measure by June 30th, 2020. Now, it's not, frankly, that clear in the legislation whether or not we have to adopt it by June 30th or that it has to become effective by June 30th. Because this is not being adopted as an emergency measure, it requires 30 days to become effective. So my recommendation to you would be, I would ask you to act on this one way or the other this evening, keeping in mind that this is not passing as an emergency. So if council determines within its next 30 days that it would choose not to carry this forward based on feedback you hear from our residents or more discussion that you have of more individual consideration, you would have two opportunities to pull this legislation back and rescind it. I know it's not an ideal method, but I'm sure I know this council takes these matters very seriously, and this also gives the public 30 days to evaluate it before it goes.
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Krieger.
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I mean, far be it from me. I mean, we spent millions of dollars on my roadways in Ward 4. Of course, I've recently gone down to Mill Shore, which was just redone as far as new blacktop. Actually, in King Memorial, I was down there the other day, and that was just repaved. So I think this is a good idea. We've all had calls where people said, when are you going to fix my road? When are you going to redo the road? So I think this is a good idea.
President?
Yes, Mr. Flippia.
I just make one comment because I think Mr. Krieger brought up a really good point. Another purpose for this funding could be used for debt servicing on road improvements. And, you know, council is aware of the fact that we probably hold right a little over $25 million, $27 million. So in debt right now, the large majority of that is actually roadway projects that we've seen here. So, not saying that we would necessarily use this money for that, but it's one purpose that it could be used for future projects that we wanted to finance that needed to be done right away. And I think that the Headlands Improvement Program is a fantastic example of that, because it was a lot of work that was pricey that had to be done in a short amount of time, and council committed to doing that, but it does require debt for that. So if a similar project in the future comes up, this year we'll be paving Center Street from Route 2 north. We're doing Tyler Boulevard right now. On the other side of the west side of Tyler Boulevard, not too many years ago. So these projects, important for us to be able to do these projects, to know that we have a revenue stream in place before we go out and issue debt. And thank goodness we were able to do that, because the council's aware we have achieved historically low rates on the debt that we have issued in recent years. And it's not just good timing, it's having the ability to know that you're able to service that debt. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Chair recognizes Mr. Marn remotely.
Council, I had the liberty today, or I should say I took the liberty today to do a little bit of research on this issue. And the townships had this opportunity about 4 or 5 years ago to do what we're doing now. Concord Township went ahead and took advantage of the situation to make sure that they had control of this money so that they could put it back, as Mr. Flipiak stated, back into cement and asphalt. So for those reasons, knowing it's going to go to our roads, and like Mr. Krieger stated, all the money that we put in, especially in his ward, I think it would be a great idea. So I don't want anyone to fall over when I say yes.
Thank you. Other discussion?
Mr. President?
Mr. Blake, remotely.
Yes. Ken, if we didn't pass this tonight, would we be able to look at it again next year? I'm hesitant, given the economic conditions we're now in with the pandemic and the amount of people, our residents, have been affected, furloughed. I'm just hesitant. Something that we could revisit for 2022. I mean, is there a need? I believe that it generates $250,000. We've never looked at this before, available to us in the past.
President?
Yeah, Mr. Lake, that was a little garbled, but I think we got the gist of it. Mr. Filipiak?
Okay.
Yeah, if I think I understood you clearly enough, Councilman. So to answer your question, adopting this and having it take effect prior to June 30th allows for us to have collections in 2021. If you did not ask this evening, you would forego that opportunity, but you could in the future adopt this in a later year and have collections going forward. In the past, the Ohio Revised Code has allowed for opportunities for cities to take advantage of these permissive taxes, and those that have not, that authority has rolled over and accrued to the county, which in all cases here in Lake County, the county had taken advantage of that. That is not the case in this as the current legislation is written. So as of right now, I think we're safe in saying that if you didn't do it this year, you could do it the following year or some subsequent year, if that answers your question.
That does. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Other comments? Just to sum up a couple things, the local roads are one of the essential services that any jurisdiction provides. It's what allows us to get to our residents and businesses with emergency forces. It allows them to get where they need to go to do business and to live the quality of life. So this is a great investment that we have. As far as I'm aware, during the shutdown, there were no local roads shut down. There may have been a little less traffic, but the roads require maintenance, and that cost is always on the increase. To summarize the timing of this, if we act tonight, there would still be a 30-day window when council could choose to rescind it. Public can make comment during that period as well. And the legislation, again, would not take effect till the beginning of 2021. There is no further discussion. Council, what is your pleasure?
Second. Move to approve.
Just a moment. We have to go through suspension first.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Lantig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Lantig?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
No.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Ordinance number 20-0-047 has been approved. Second reading, there are none. Third reading, there are none. Manager's report, Mr. Filipiak.
Thank you, members of council. Just a few updates. Last Friday, May 15th, we received upwards of 2 inches of rain throughout the city over the course of a few hours. The Department of Public Works had personnel out responding to a small number of complaints and inspecting various choke points. Overall, we received about 20 calls or emails from residents that experienced some degree of problem. In almost every case, the problems were related to volume of rainfall or natural debris collecting against grates and inlets. Issues were randomly spread throughout the city and really not part of any system-wide problems, I'm happy to say. All main drainage structures functioned as designed, including the new two-town ditch detention pond, as well as the rice detention pond. And the Public Works and Engineering departments are following up individually with residents and business owners that did contact us. We've had a number of people contact the city inquiring about the placement of the new decorative light poles in the Old Village District, which many of them ended up in the middle of the sidewalk. Part of the contract requires that sidewalks be bumped out in those areas. around the poles, just as we did in the first phase of that project. So the reality is that existing utilities and the style of lights that we use in Menor Avenue and on 615 really makes it difficult to place anything there. And we learn that every time contractors start digging in there, because we have disrupted water service lines in some cases, sewer lines. So it's very difficult construction. But with respect to the sidewalks, that will be bumped out, and that should be occurring as early as this week. There have been a lot of recent changes to the orders by the Ohio Director of Public Health, Amy Acton, and Governor DeWine. These allow for the continuation of some public recreation opportunities with limitations. And I wanted to give some insight tonight, both to council and our residents, as to what the city is planning for. So we don't have a go-ahead on a lot of things, but what we do have a go-ahead on, we're going to try to provide some outlets for our residents. So pickleball and tennis courts will be open May 26th with rules that would be posted at the facilities and online. Baseball and softball fields that are owned by the city will be available for use by our youth leagues. However, those leagues will be responsible for complying with all the rules that are required by the state orders. As of right now, we can't speak for the schools, but the school system is still closing its facilities. Then that includes all of their recreation facilities like their baseball diamonds. So that will have to change in order for some of these leagues to succeed. The city is planning on opening Civic Center pool only for Mentor residents only. Our target date will be June 13th, and that is subject to approval of an operating plan by the General Health District, which we are currently have under draft right now. All day camps beginning July 6th will proceed. The only exceptions to that could be those few that are conducted by outside vendors for the city who we are working with right now to confirm their participation. We still have no word on when or if or how current state rules will be lifted for larger gatherings at places like our amphitheater or other city locations. But we will keep council and the public updated as we are informed of any changes that might impact those. City administrative offices will be closed on Monday, May 25th, in observance of Memorial Day. And then finally, council, because we believe in honoring our fallen warriors is important to our community, our annual Memorial Day observance will be held this Monday, May 25th, 2020. Public's participation will be limited to a vehicular procession, which will begin at 9:30 a.m. This procession will be comprised of cars only. No motorcycles, buses, bicycles, or pedestrians will be allowed. Participants are to assemble at Memorial Middle School, located at 8979 Menor Avenue at 9 a.m. The Menor Police will be on hand to form the parade line, to manage traffic, and lead the procession, which will make its way north and wind its way through the cemetery in front of the Vietnam War Memorial before exiting on Jackson Street. For everyone's safety, participants are required to remain in their cars at all times. Please exit the cemetery immediately after the parade, following guidance from traffic control officers. City Council will preside over a ceremony to be conducted at 10 a.m. in front of the Vietnam Memorial. Due to mass gathering restrictions currently in effect in Ohio, this event is closed to the public, but it will be broadcast live on the Menor channel, Facebook, and YouTube. And residents can visit thecityofmenor.com/news for additional details. That's all, council.
Clerk's correspondence. Julie?
Council is in receipt of the Menor Municipal Court April 2020 month-end report. That is all.
Commission committee reports, meeting minutes, Tree Commission, April 8th, 2020. Municipal Planning Commission, April 16th, 2020. Board of Building and Zoning Appeals, April 14th, 2020. Old business. Hearing none. New business.
Mr. President,
Mr. Martin.
Yes, I would just like to say, and I'm sure on behalf of all of us, happy birthday to Mr. John Krieger. He's like a father figure to all of us.
Ouch.
Thank you.
We will dispense with singing. Any other new business? Oh, we have the walk-on. Yes, excuse me. Where is it?
Here.
One more piece of walk-on legislation, ordinance number 20-0-047.
Ordinance temporarily extending deadlines and modifying other permit conditions imposed by Mentor Code of Ordinances, Section 1161.04B, for conducting retail activities from tents and other temporary structures, and Section 1165.03A, related to temporary events during the state of emergency declared by the governor pursuant to Executive Order 2020-01D and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Filipiak.
Mr. President, members of council, and we appreciate council considering this legislation this evening. It seems that a lot of what we do these days is reacting to the changing environment that we find ourselves in with respect to how we learn to live with the coronavirus. With the lifting of certain restrictions by the state of Ohio now that are allowing restaurants and other retail businesses opening, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, seeing some other aspects of our economy opening up and our way of life returning to somewhat normal conditions, we are trying to react and provide some relief to the business community and organizations, and to be adaptable to some of the things they may need to do in order to adapt to these changes. So, for example, restaurants are allowed to conduct outside dining, but they're in next week, as early as next week, they'll be able to have inside dining. But in all cases, their seating is limited. We have had a lot of input from our business community about trying to be creative in expanding some of that seating area, including outside dining, for those that don't currently have it, or for those who do and want to open up some larger areas. So what this ordinance would do is give the planning director a little bit of latitude, extending, permitting these activities, and some of these could be retail activity limitations, of course, that would allow them to conduct their business a little bit more effectively in some areas that are currently may require a conditional use permit to do these things permanently. But while the pandemic is in place, we're hoping to provide a quicker way to react to the business needs here in our city. So this would extend from 14 days to a period of time at the discretion of the planning director, temporary events, as well as provide some relief from certain other conditions related to things like the use of public address systems or larger gatherings that could include everything, business activities to nonprofit activities. So I'm happy to answer any questions on this. I also have Planning Director Kathy Mitchell on the line as well, if she would like to address council or answer any questions that you may have in terms of the exercise of that discretion. A couple of things that we did write into this that I want to make clear that will hopefully give council a little bit of assurance that this authority would not be abused. Any of these approvals would be subject to the review by the city manager. Any approvals given by the planning director that might include, like taking, for example, outside dining, we would have an internal committee review for public safety that would include a member of the police and fire departments to ensure that things like travel, traffic patterns and things like that don't disrupt the safety of our residents. And also, this would not include the opportunity beyond the current code limit of 14 days to display outside inventory. So think of this as providing services outside of the normal envelope of a business. Some of you are aware of the fact that some businesses right now are providing curbside service. That really falls somewhat outside of the bounds of their building envelope. These would be viewed as, these would be subject to review as a conditional use, but a necessary way to conduct business right now. So again, we want to be able to react to the needs of our community, our business community, as quickly as possible.
Mr.
Council,
President,
discussion, questions? Yes, Mr. Kirschner.
I certainly favor this legislation. The only request I would make is that when these administration approvals are made, can we make sure that council is made aware of them as we go along? Thank you.
Administration?
Yes, we will do that. In fact, I can include any of those approvals in the weekly report.
Any other discussion?
Mr. President?
Ms. Dowling?
I'm very pleased to see that we are not eliminating residents that did not previously have outdoor dining, that they will have the opportunity. It's just kind of been, people have viewed so many of the regulations as being unfair. Who can do that? So I'm really glad to see that we are. I understand you're going to take safety into consideration, and that is utmost, but I am pleased that we're doing it. And just one question, do we have an approximate time frame? This is not open-ended, or?
No, this ordinance does have a sunset, so it would sunset either at the end of the declaration of the emergency by the governor or October 31st, whichever is earlier.
Okay, well, I know nobody has a magic ball to know what is in the future, so, okay. I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
President,
Yes, Mr. Krieger.
question for the administration. You discussed this with the Commerce/Liquor Department, State of Ohio. Even if we allow them to set up a tent, they have code liquor department that's, they have to have a diagram on file where they serve liquor.
And that has come up in these discussions. So, you know, we want to make it clear that all we are doing is allowing for the ability to process these types of requests within the scope of our zoning code. Does not relieve people of the boundaries imposed by their liquor license, but I do think that there's a lot of people. I'm aware of the fact that a lot of businesses around the state are petitioning the liquor board right now to give them some leeway. Well, I don't know if that would happen, but clearly this would have no impact on what we do. Would have no impact on their. They could do food sales, they might do other types of sales that are part of their regular operation, but that would not include liquor if their permit does not. And we would make that clear, Councilman, in our permit that have to be any of those types of activities separate from any authorization.
Thank you.
Well, with the good weather arriving, hopefully timing couldn't be better. And I think many residents are itching to see what local restaurants and retail can come up with to be outside with. Thank you to the administration for a proactive measure. Council, what's your pleasure?
Ben?
Second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Landig?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Persons before council, having none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Sorry, Ray.
This meeting is adjourned.
Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
All right.